Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, August 5th, 2022. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy joined by Jonah Booker for his usual Friday visit. Going to be covering practice later this morning, my man, 9:30 a.m. It is open just like it was yesterday. Yesterday we got Ryan Day after practice. It was great seeing practice yesterday, J-Book. Today after practice, we're going to get Tony Alford and the running backs. Can't wait for that. This is going to be the J-Book show. I'm just curious to get everything that you took in from yesterday. We'll get your thoughts about Ryan Day's press conference after practice in a moment. What was your main takeaway from practice itself yesterday, the first practice?
First and foremost, it's almost football season, baby. Hey, getting those reports from you, Dave, and Steve and Pat, man, gets me fired up. So just going through and listen to the Coach Day's press conference, and I would say two things for me, Dave, that really stood out is number one, Julian Fleming. Let's go, Julian. Let's go, Julian Fleming, baby. He's the kid that came in highly regarded, number one wide receiver in the country, 5-star consensus. A lot of people look at him and say, hey, he probably hasn't lived up to the hype. You can look at this, if you really dig deep and see what the circumstances were. You had COVID, you had the injuries, and to hear that Ryan Day said that he was an Iron Buckeye from the offseason because he performed so well in their strength and conditioning program, and he's back healthy. That right there was music to my ears, Dave. Like I had to get up out my seat and give it a round of applause. Like, come on, Julian, let's go, baby. Like, hey, the time is now for him. I know we always talk about JSN and Marvin and Emeka, but just to hear that Julian Fleming is, not only back healthy, but also leading by example to those younger guys. Because I don't know if any of the wide receivers really graded out as an Iron Buckeye besides him. I know they talked about Emeka. He was a gold. He graded out as a gold standing, but just hearing Julian and then CJ Hicks. I mean, the linebacker has been one of Ohio State's Achilles heels for several years now. And the fact that Ryan Day mentioned CJ Hicks as a guy that already looks like he belongs, like he's part of the guys that's been there for years as a true freshman. That right there really got me fired up. And I think Hicks has the opportunity to really, try to crack that lineup. You've seen it, Dave. You've been on the beat for several years. When they start really talking freshmen, the actual coaches, and they usually shy away from hyping up some type of freshmen, but when they start really talking about the freshmen, that's when you really got a ball player. Same thing with Kai Stokes, because Ryan Day mentioned him and said he's going to play a lot this year.
No doubt about it. I love Kai Stokes. And CJ Hicks, I don't know how much he's going to play this year, as far as frontline role, but I think he's a future superstar. And maybe he will play a lot this year. We'll see. Maybe he can play like a Raekwon McMillan role where he's not a starter, but plays a lot. We'll see. I love CJ Hicks, though. All right, let's get into this. So Ryan Day, it was, as always, he's fantastic. I just love every time we get a chance to speak with Coach Day. Anything that surprised you? Anything that really piqued your interest from Coach Day's over 30-minute interview with us after practice?
I mean, besides the obvious with Jake Siebert moving over to corner, I mean
that's
care
about that. Everybody's talking about that. I don't even care. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I was just gonna say, besides that being hilarious, I mean that's just a body that's going to be out there for scout
Right.
team. But I thought that was pretty funny. But what really surprised me, just talking about Stroud when Ryan Day was asked about what were some of the things that he really likes about CJ Stroud going into the season, and he talked about his vision, and what he means by that is CJ Stroud is now at the point in his career where the game is slowing down, Dave. And when you have a guy who put up ungodly numbers last year, just kind of thrown into the fire as a first-year starter, now you're talking about he's seeing the whole field. He knows how to get the offense out of bad plays. He knows where to go with the football. His study habits have what they talked about in the offseason. His study habits and his leadership off the field has increased tremendously. Now you're talking about a guy with an NFL arm, an NFL pedigree, where the game is slowing down. I think he has the opportunity to write all the records in Ohio State's quarterback book here. So when you hear Ryan Day talk about, he's in that mode right now to where, he knows where he needs to go with the football. He knows what he's looking at coverage wise. I love what I'm hearing. And then just talking about the offensive line, that was one of the biggest storylines going into this season. As much as a lot of people like to bang on Grits to Dradra, as far as the projects and the misses that he had, and we talked about it on Spaces Day, that offensive line, they have some guys that's going to be able to play some football. And that was the biggest question mark. There were a lot of guys that they accepted scholarship commitments from that a lot of people questioned, are they Ohio State material or not? And you're starting to see some of those guys that were considered projects starting to move into that second team offensive line. They're one play away from potentially being starters. And I know we like to see, Justin Fry land those top tier out of state 5-star, tackles and guards and stuff. But one thing that a lot of fans have to keep in mind, they're going to have about, 15, 16 scholarship offensive linemen after this next cycle. He's going to have
right now,
he's going to have a loaded offensive line room. It's just going to be, can he get the most out of those guys? And that's what we're banking on right now with Justin Fry. It's the offensive line and some of those guys that previously were considered a project or maybe misses, now starting to kind of elevate their games, starting to get a little bit more mature in the weight room and building that depth.
Great segue, my friend. Let's talk about the depth on the offensive line. Look at this. So, when Ryan Day saying the biggest concern on the team, he didn't say it yesterday, but leaving spring, he said the biggest concern on the team was depth on the offensive line. And I'm out there yesterday, and I'm like, you got big Zen Michalski as a redshirt freshman coming on at left tackle. This is a second-team offensive line. Zen Michalski, Enoch Vamahi at left guard. You got Jacob James at center. You got Trey LaRue, right guard, and then you got Josh Fryer at right tackle. I mean, if that is your problem, and by the way, Trey LaRue is probably the 10th guy out of the two deep. Listen, I mean, I've seen a lot of second-team O-lines at Ohio State that are a lot worse than that. I actually like this second-team offensive line. Zen Michalski's really come on. Josh Fryer is the best backup offensive lineman on the team. He's now healthy. J-Book, your thoughts on the second-team O-line and the starters, and just your thoughts overall on this O-line.
I would say this, Dave. I feel much better about the offensive line going into the season. That was one of my worries. I feel really good about the starting O-line. I think the starting offensive line has the potential to be all Big Ten type of guys, pretty much across the board, even if it's, second or third team, especially because you have true guards in there instead of the 4 offensive tackles. But these guys that are coming up, Fryer is huge. I cannot state how big it is for this team to have Josh Fryer back healthy. He brings that element of toughness and nastiness to the table, and just getting him back to be able to lead, to be the leader of that second team offensive line is critical. I can't wait to hear some of the reports once the pads start popping and the scrimmages start going on. That's when you're really going to start hearing the reports about, how did those guys go? Because they're going to go against arguably one of the deepest defensive line rooms in all of college football. Some people are going to point to Georgia, some people are going to point to Alabama, and rightfully so. Those teams have recruited extremely well. But you and I have talked about it, Dave. This defensive line that they're going to be going against in practice, they won't face another defensive line unit as good as what they're going to face in practice all season long until they potentially make the playoffs.
That's exactly right. All right, let's get to this. Curious to get your take on this. So I don't remember as many true freshmen playing meaningful roles at Ohio State as we saw last year. That's not going to happen this year. But there's going to be, you mentioned Kai Stokes. There's some other guys that are going to need to play for the Buckeyes that are true freshmen this year. Caden Curry, maybe Tegra Chabola can, challenge for a spot on the two deep. I don't think he's really going to play much as a true freshman. Obviously, CJ Hicks, Sonny Styles. Get into some guys that you think might be able to help this team as a true freshman this year. Again, not as a starter necessarily, but maybe be on the two deep at least and help this team.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first one is definitely going to be Kai Stokes. When Ryan Day mentions him in his very first opening press conference, that right there tells you that that kid's going to play. We saw what we got out of him during the spring, so he's a kid that's going to play right away. The second guy that I would say is Caden Curry. I think Caden Curry has an opportunity to get into that second rotation with the defensive line there. He is a war daddy. He's one of those guys that are going to go out there and bring that toughness. He has an unrelenting motor, and I think he's going to push a lot of those upperclassmen that's been in the program, like a Tyler Friday, like a Javante Jean Baptiste. I think he's going to really push those guys to try to get into that next rotation. And then obviously CJ Hicks. We don't know how much CJ is going to play. There's no way CJ redshirts. If anything, he's going to cut his teeth on special teams. But if CJ is what they're saying he is, if he's making the most out of his reps, I can see a situation mid-season if the linebackers aren't playing at an elite level where Ryan Day is putting the signal out, hey, he wants a top 10 defense. So in order to have a top 10 defense, you're going to need your linebackers playing at an extremely high level. If those guys aren't playing at a high level, I can see a guy like CJ Hicks getting his swing at the bat to see what he does. Other than that, Dave, I mean, if you go down the list of some of the guys, maybe a Sonny Styles gets in there.
Jair Brown. I've heard
Jair
Brown. Now, to be clear, like the top four corners are set, but they only have 6 scholarship corners, which is one of the reasons they have a kicker playing corner in Jake Seibert. I guess, do we have to say now they have 6.5 scholarship corners because Jake Seibert's on scholarship? But seriously, like, I was asking Jackson Smith and Jigba and Ronnie Hickman at Big Ten Media Days, like, of the freshmen, nothing against Ryan Turner, but like, who's like a young corner that didn't play last year. And they obviously talked about Jordan Hancock, who played a little bit, J.K. Johnson, obviously. So they know who the top 4 corners are. We got the 2 starters coming back, Cam Brown, Denzel Burke. Jordan Hancock is basically like almost like a third starter now, like the way he's playing. Yeah. They love J.K. Johnson. But what I was told was, if they need a 5th corner, it's going to be Jair Brown. That's another true freshman that could get in there. So we'll see what happens. Go ahead.
I'll give you one more. And you talked about him yesterday on Spaces. Hero Canoe.
Yeah.
Floppy belly. Floppy belly. He's a big boy out there. Like you said, got the belly out, ready to roll. And here's the thing, Dave. Him and Tyleek, we don't have too many of those big 300-plus guys that are space eaters. So I think there is a role for a Hero Canoe type of guy that can come in there and give some meaningful reps. And we've seen it before. Larius Johnson's known for at least throwing some of those younger guys in there, maybe 5, 6, 7 reps just to give some of those upperclassmen a blow. But Hero Canoe, with his body size, which makes him kind of college ready right now, I think he has an opportunity to see the field. So just tallying those guys up, you're probably, to go back to your original question, you're probably looking at about maybe 5, maybe 6 true freshmen who have the opportunity. But other than that, because his team is so deep, which it has to make you, as a Ohio State fan, extremely happy to know you don't have to rely on freshmen. This is a championship roster who has the potential to go all the way, and you don't want to have to rely on freshmen. You're going to utilize some of those guys who are good enough to provide solid depth.
Let's talk some recruiting. All right, so Jayden Bonsu, I'm telling you, when you get a crystal ball from the dean, Bill Kurlick, the Fong, Steve Wiltfong, you can almost lock it in. Jayden Bonsu from Jersey, same high school as Cody Simon, I believe, St. Peter's, 4-star safety in the 2023 class, has been crystal ball to the Buckeyes. Great news. Your thoughts on that, Mr. Booker?
We needed some good news on the defensive side of the ball, Dave. I mean, the month of July ended in June was just absolutely brutal. So to get a guy in Jayden Bonsu, who I think will be your in-the-box type of safety there. At one point, it looked like he was headed towards Miami. It looked like it was all said and done because there was a lot of speculation that Bonsu wanted to see what happened with Caleb Downs. Once Caleb Downs chose Alabama, that opened the door back up for Ohio State. And you have to give Ohio State staff a lot of credit here, even though a lot of people at the time thought that Downs may have been headed towards Columbus. They kept that open line of communication up with Bonsu to say, hey, come on in. We want you now. You're going to potentially have 3 safeties in the class with him, Hawkins and the kid from Cincinnati, Malik Harford. So I like the DB class that they're bringing in. Yes, it was a letdown to miss on Downs, but getting the guy in Bonsu, I think has a lot of upside. He was almost, signed, sealed, and delivered to Miami. A lot of people thought that he was getting a pretty big NIL package to go down south. But with Ohio State coming in here, keeping that relationship strong, keeping the lines of communication open, it looks like it's going to pay off here. I think he's set to commit in this month in August towards the end. So good news on the defensive side because they really needed some positive news. And I would say this, Dave, when it comes to recruiting, how big will that Notre Dame game be when it comes to them? Basically, Ryan Day and the staff, they're pushing all the chips in when it comes to recruiting because you saw a lot of teams towards the end of July before the quiet period, they had those massive barbecues. They had it down in Alabama. They had it Miami, Georgia, Texas A&M. Even Michigan had that barbecue. Ohio State decided that we're going to hold off on that because we want to get all of these kids up to the Notre Dame game, prime time at night. They're banking that the atmosphere in the shoe is going to be electric, and they think that's going to turn the tide in a lot of the recruiting. So I would say, hey, let's do it if that's what they want to do. And I truly believe that Ohio State is going to go out and put on a show that first game against Notre Dame in front of a lot of recruits nationally.
Great stuff as always from Jonah Booker. Really appreciate your insights, Jay Book. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers out there. Appreciate you guys very much. Hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend.